my son was diagnosed autistic at age 2, my main concern was figuring out how to best support him so he could do what he wanted to do and needed to do. I never imagined that most of my energy would have to go towards fighting for his basic rights to exist, to be educated, and to be included in society. Most non-speaking students are not included in general education classrooms. They're segregated into classrooms where they're taught pretty much nothing, and then it's later said that they cannot learn, when in actuality, there's never been any attempt to teach them.
Where'd it go?
Additionally, the lack of non-speaking children in general education sets up a precedent for the students and parents in those schools to not expect non-speaking children to exist anywhere, so they're often attacked when they're out in public spaces throughout the rest of their lives. I spoke about the discrimination of non-speakers in public spaces with Tiffany Hammond of Fidgets and Fries, a social media powerhouse who advocates for autistics and non-speaking autistics. Her book, A Day with No Words, is currently out and a New York Times bestseller. Non-speaking people get an unfair amount of abuse, and when there's intersectionality of non-speaking and Black, forget it. Then it's off the charts, right? So,
right.
I want to kind of, what has been your experience with your son and yourself that kind of prompted you to write this book?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like where do you start?
Right. It's like, where do you start? Where's the beginning?
Or I guess I will point you specifically. There's one page that basically you're like, his mouth might not work, but his ears work just fine. So what prompted that? Like, what was the real life or one of the real life situations that prompted that phrase?
Everything in our book was like real things that occurred throughout these different days, but I just kind of like put them all together into, a book and gave it a rhyme, and all the pretty words. And that was a day when we were at the park and, Aiden's playing and he's, having fun. He's just playing in the grass and he's spinning around and he's dancing and he's jumping. And that's when you had more people staring and making comments and having like the funny faces and like looking disgusted. And it was like a group of parents that he was too old to be at the park, that he's just throwing all of the stuff around and he's just scaring everyone. And it's just a lot of I don't even know why people bring children like that out here. I can't exactly remember what I said. I was just like, oh, we have every right to be here. You're being rude. He can hear you. And just because he's different from you guys and he's playing in a different way doesn't mean that he doesn't, understand the words that you're saying. And you're very rude. You're very hurtful. And, and something like, you should stop.
Yeah, I like where you say, the fact that you say, the kids weren't scared. The parents were, right? Like I've encountered that a lot too. But then they use the kids as an excuse to highlight their own ableism. It's been my experience.
Exactly. So,
I mean, we were in the park. My son was 9. He's now 15. And he loved to play in the fountain because he loves water. So he was just had a little cup and he was taking the water from the fountain and then throwing it over his head and throwing it over his head. And there was this mother with a baby who came towards the fountain and claimed that he wet the baby. And I said, well, one, it's a fountain. Like, if you don't want to be wet, don't bring your baby towards a fountain, right? Like, it's a play fountain. You're supposed to play in it. 2, I didn't see any mark on this child of water. So I was just like, in my head, I was like, they just don't like the way he looks. But then she went and got her husband, and the husband came and punched the cup out of his hand. And she and the husband started screaming effing R word at him over and over and over, like 10 times. And, so I got in the middle and but it was like things like this happen pretty frequently, like not that extreme. That was like the most physical it's gotten, but it's constant, you know.
They do that a lot. And I think that's also ties into one of the questions that I do not like the most. One of the questions they give me is, what is it that Black autistic people themselves can do to keep themselves safe and all these other things? I'm like, okay. And just like the question is wild to me because that is putting the responsibility for our harm on us. And I'm like, I can't do that. I don't want to answer this question. I don't want to ask you how to not hurt us.
Yes. No, the whole purpose of your advocacy is to highlight how society needs to change to allow these people to be included and safe and loved. Not that these people need to change, because they're not. Why should they change? You change your mind, change your attitude, change your behavior on how you treat them.
Yes, and don't put the burden of our treatment solely on our shoulders. Like that is what is one of the most frustrating things in being in these spaces and being an advocate, is just like seeing that.
I also had the chance to speak with Tiffany Joseph of Nigh Functioning Autism, an autistic and epileptic person herself who often deals with situations where she cannot speak. She has learned to rely on using AAC devices to communicate. She now also helps teach and advocate for those who need AAC devices.
It's hard to speak, like generally when I'm having or after I've had seizures, like my brain does not do words properly. So I can just write it and go and just have it, just press a button and it will say what I need to say in a much better, more understandable way. But then I would find that people did not care to listen, or they did not, they would look at somebody with an AAC device as just somebody who's playing around. A lot of people think that when they see, so this is like for my kids, my students, when they see a child with a tablet, they automatically assume that child has a toy. They can take it away when they want. They can yell at the parents for a child having a tablet at a table, at any location. People feel free to judge parents whose children have tablets. They feel free to judge the child, and if it's an adult who's typing on a tablet, they think that adult is literally being rude and not paying attention to them. Like, if I look down to type, then I obviously don't care about the conversation that's going on. I can't remember how I got through that frustration when I could not communicate properly. Before social media and before the phone, I felt like I wasn't human before. I could not interact with people before. And now I'm like a human. Everything to me, the first thing I'm going to think about is safety. Okay, such and such is hurting me. Send that text. Post it on Facebook, whatever you have to do. Send a picture. Send a video. For speakers, they can say so and so touched me. That's a very basic thing. And the way non-speakers have that availability or option is through their AAC apps.
I also spoke with Mary Fashik of Upgrade Accessibility about her experiences with speech discrimination.
You know, and I do want to acknowledge, because I do have speech, that I do have some sort of privilege over those who are non-speaking. But I don't have the privilege of having a what society deems as normal speech. So there's a lot of prejudice And that prejudice started from a very early age, in schools, and, being called all sorts of names and being mocked and bullied. And, because of my speech, even the woman who adopted me said to me, "Mary, no one wants to hear you talk." So I internalized that. And the ironic part about that is that I became a very good observer. So that is the message I've always gotten. Is what's wrong with you? Why do you sound like that? And this is like constant. And now over time I have, told myself, well, this is how you sound. There's nothing wrong with how you sound, but growing up, going through speech therapy year after year after year, and my personal experience was, it was torture, it was abuse, because you're being told that you're doing this wrong. This is wrong. You sound wrong. You carry that through your
Yes.
adolescence and through your adult life. You carry that with you. I even went back to speech therapy in my 30s, and I regret doing that because it really made me think that something was horribly wrong with me. I understand that speech therapy should be helpful, but from my personal experience, it was nothing but emotional abuse. Let people exist in their body, let them exist the way they exist. If they don't communicate the way they used to, well, then that is a you problem and not a them problem. Allow people to exist the way they exist and the way they exist authentically. And I want to end with a quote that I have said before. The most difficult and necessary thing that a disabled person can do is exist in non-disabled spaces unapologetically.
I was also able to interview Will, a non-speaking autistic 15-year-old in Toronto, Canada, whom my son met through an online non-speakers class. Will points at letters on a sheet to spell out his thoughts, while his mom records what he spells and then reads it back for him. Will has been included in Gen Ed classes since 5th grade using this communication method. He graduated from his middle school as valedictorian. He is currently in a Gen Ed high school.
My experiences have depended on the treatment I get, my support person or companion in any situation. If they are respectful toward me, others are more likely to respect me too. If the person I'm with treats me like a non-thinking and non-feeling thing, then I can guarantee they are modeling this to everyone around who are looking to my support person for a lead on how to deal with me.
What was the difference that you felt going from the segregated classroom to the general education classroom?
N-E-S-I-L-E. Felt validated but sad for the friends I left behind.
If you had stayed in the segregated classroom, would your view of the future be brighter than it is having been in Gen Ed?
O-M-G-N-O-W-A-Y. Oh, gee, no way. Really, I am still a little scared. Imagine what it would be like if I never got the chance to show my family who I am. They can try to plan with me for a future I can enjoy.
I'd like to read you the article that Michael wrote for Anyway magazine, a magazine for tweens. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm 15 years old, and I'm autistic, which for me means it is hard for me to speak, so I type to communicate. Unfortunately, people often think that when someone cannot speak, it means they're not intelligent. This is not true for me, and it can be frustrating to have people think that. My body does not always listen to what my mind tells it to do, so sometimes I'm saying or doing things I do not mean to say or do. For example, I sometimes repeat a word that sounds good to me, like prosciutto, over and over again, and then people think I want prosciutto, when I just want to say the word. To be clear, I will never refuse prosciutto, but I just want to explain that my spoken words aren't as clear as my typed words. I call myself non-speaking and not nonverbal because I have words in my brain all the time. So I'm not nonverbal. It's just that I have a hard time getting them to come out of my mouth when I want them to. It's much easier to type them out. I'm currently very interested in chemistry and astrobiology. I think it's fun to see different experiments produce unexpected results in lab work, and I'm interested in the universe because it tells us how it all began, how it will end, and what our place is in the grand scheme of things. I'm also fascinated by the idea of what various alien biology might look like, as it would depend on the atmospheric and environmental conditions where the aliens grew up. I have done a lot of chemistry experiments with my father, who is a scientist. Some of my favorite ones included running electricity through a metal submerged in water and watching the liquid turn blue and then black as a result of a delayed reaction between the starch and the iodine. I look forward to studying more about these topics in high school and college, and possibly even graduate school. I belong to an online group of non-speaking autistics from around the world who type to communicate, and some of them are in science PhD programs, and I would like to do that someday as well. I like being homeschooled a lot because it's much less stressful than what I hear about going to school. I can do lots of work, but also rest when I need to. One of my favorite things to do every day is take long walks by the East River near our apartment in Astoria. Watching the waves is very soothing, and it helps me relax. I also love listening to friends speak to me, which doesn't happen very often. Many people tend to ignore me when I'm around, but there are a few who always say hello and tell me what is happening in their lives, and I appreciate them very much. I hope the world starts to understand non-speaking autistics a bit more, especially since everyone texts and emails to communicate these days, so they know how much easier it can be to type than to talk to someone. And if this helps to do that, that would make me very happy.